What's up, guys? Welcome back to part 9 of Reading the Big Short. I'm Ricky here, and let's continue reading for 30 minutes. This time I got enough time. So, starting now. The one Wall Street trader who had tried to persuade AIGFP to stop betting on the subprime mortgage bond market witnessed none of these internal politics. Greg Lippmann simply assumed that the force of his argument had won them over, until it didn't. He never understood why AIGFP changed its mind, but left itself so exposed. It sold no more credit default swap to Wall Street, but did nothing to offset the $50 billion worth that it had already sold. Even that, Lippmann thought, might cause the market to crash. If AIGFP refused to take the long side of the trade, he thought, no one would, and the subprime mortgage market would shut down. Here was the start of a great mystery. The market didn't so much as blink. Wall Street firms found new buyers of AAA rated subprime CDOs, new places to stuff the riskiest BBB tranches of subprime mortgage bonds. Though who these people were was not entirely clear for some time, even to Greg Lippmann. The subprime mortgage machine roared on. The loans that were being made to actual human beings only grew crappier, but bizarrely, the price of insuring them, the price of buying credit default swaps, fell. By April 2006, Lippmann's superior at the Deutsche Bank were asking him to defend his quixotic gamble. They wanted him to make money just by sitting in the middle of this new market, the way Goldman Sachs did, crossing buyers and sellers. They reached an agreement. Lippmann could keep his expensive short position as long as he could prove that if he had to sell it, there'll be some other investor willing to take it off his hand on short notice. That is, he needed to foster a more active market in credit default swap. If he wanted to keep his bet, he had to find others to join him in it. By the summer of 2006, Greg Lippmann had a new metaphor in his head, a tug of war, the entire subprime mortgage lending machine, including his own employer, Deutsche Bank, pulled on one end of the rope while he, Greg Lippmann, hauled back on the other. He needed others to join him. They all pulled together. His teammate would pay him a fee for being on his side, but they'll get rich too. Lippmann soon find that the people he most expected to see the ugly truth of the subprime mortgage market, the people who ran funds that specialize in mortgage bond trading, were the ones least likely to see anything but what they had been seeing for years. Here was a strange but true fact. The closer you were to the market, the harder it was to perceive it fully. Realizing this, Lippmann went looking for stock investor with a lot of exposure to falling home prices or falling housing stock prices, and showed them his idea as a hedge. Look, you're making a fortune as this stuff keeps going up. Why not spend a little to cover yourself in a collapse? Greed hadn't worked, so he tried fear. He obtained a list of all the big stockholders in New Century, the big subprime lender. Prominent on the list was a hedge fund called Front Point Partners. He called the relevant Deutsche Bank salesman to set up a meeting. The salesman failed to notice that there was more than one hedge fund inside Front Point. It wasn't a single fund, but a collection of independently managed hedge funds, and that the fund that was long New Century stock was a small group based on the West Coast. When Greg Lippmann arrived in Steve Eastman's conference room in Midtown Manhattan, Eastman surprised him by saying, "We are not the Front Point that is long New Century stock. We are the Front Point that is short New Century stock." Eastman was already betting against a share of companies such as New Century and IndyMac Bank, which originated subprime loan along with companies that build the houses bought with the loan, such as Toll Brothers. These bets were not entirely satisfying because they weren't bet against the companies but market sentiments about the companies. Also, the bets were expensive to maintain. The companies paid high dividends, and their share were often costly to borrow. New Century, for instance, paid a 20% dividend and its share cost 12% a year to borrow. For the pleasure of shorting $100 million worth of New Century shares, Steve Eastman forked out $32 million a year. In his search for stock market investor, he might terrify with his doomsday scenario. Lippman had made a lucky strike. He had stumbled onto a stock market investor who held an even darker view of the subprime mortgage market than he did. Eastman knew more about the market, its character, and its deep, deprivative than anyone Lippman had ever spoken with. If anyone would make a dramatic bet against the prime, he thought it was Eastman, and so he was puzzled when Eastman didn't do it. He was even more puzzled when several months later Eastman's new head trader, Danny Moose, and his research guy, Vinny Daniels, asked him to come back and to explain it all over again. The problem with someone who is transparently self-interested is that the extent of his interest is never clear. Danny simply mistrusts Lippman at first sight. Fucking Lippman, he called him, as in fucking Lippman never looks you in the eye when he talks to you. It bothers the shit out of me when he could not believe that Deutsche Bank would let this guy loose to run around and torpedo the market unless it served the narrow interests of Deutsche Bank. To Danny and Vinny, Greg Lippman was a walking embodiment of the bond market, which is to say he was put on earth to screw the customers. 3 times in as many months, Danny and Vinny called and Lippman returned, and that fact alone heightened their suspicion of him. He wasn't driving up from Wall Street to Midtown to promote world peace. So why was he here? Each time Lippman would talk a mile a minute, and Danny and Vinny would share in wonder. Their meeting acquired the flavor of a postmodern literary puzzle. The story rang true, even as the narrator seemed entirely unreliable. At some point during each of these sessions, Winnie would stop him to ask, Greg, I'm trying to figure out why you are even here. This was a signal to bombard Lippman with accusatory questions. It was such a great idea. Why don't you quit Deutsche Bank and start a hedge fund and make a fortune for yourself? It'll take me 6 months to set up a hedge fund. The world might wake up to this insanity next week. I have to play the hand I've been dealt. If it's such a great idea, why are you giving it away to us? I'm not giving anything away. I'm not giving away anything. The supply is infinite. Yeah, but why bother even telling us? I'll charge you getting in and getting out. I need to pay the electricity bills. It's zero sum. Who's on the other side? Who's the idiot? Those stuff, stupid Germans. They take rating agencies seriously. They believe in the rule. Why does Deutsche Bank allow you to trash a market that they sit at the center of? I don't have any particular allegiance to Deutsche Bank. I just work there. Bullshit. They pay you. How do we know the people running your CDO machine aren't just using your enthusiasm for shorting your own market to exploiters? Have you met the people running our CDO machine? At some point, Danny and Vinny dropped even the pretense that they were seeking new information about credit default swap and subprime mortgage bond. They were just hoping the guy might slip up in some way that confirmed that he was indeed the lying Wall Street scumbag that they presume him to be. We're trying to figure out where we fit into this world, said Vinny. I don't believe him that he needs us because he has too much of this stuff. So why is he doing this? Lippman, for his part, felt like a witness under interrogation. These guys were trying to crack him. A few months later, he pitched his idea to Phil Falcone, who ran a giant hedge fund called Harbinger Capital. Falcon would buy billions of dollars in credit default swap virtually on the spot. Falcon knew 1/10 of what these guys knew about the prime mortgage market, but Falcon trusted Lipman and these guys did not. In their final meeting, Vinny finally put the matter bluntly. Greg, he said, don't take this the wrong way, but I'm just trying to figure out how you're going to fuck me. They never actually finished waiting the soul of Greg Lipman. Rather, they were interrupted by two pieces of urgent news. The first came in May 2006. Standard & Poor's announced its plan to change the model used to rate subprime mortgage bond. The model would change July 1st, 2006. The announcement said, but all the subprime bond issued before that would be rated by the old, presumably less rigorous model. Instantly, the creation of subprime bond shot up dramatically. They were stuffing the channel, said Rennie, getting as much shit out so that it could be rated by the old model. The fear of new and better rating suggests that even the big Wall Street firm knew that the bonds they'd been creating had been overrated. The other piece of new concern home prices. Eastman spoke often to a housing market analyst at Credit Suisse named Ivy Zillman. The simple measure of sanity in housing prices, Zillman argued, was the ratio of median home prices to income. Historically, in the United States, it ran around 3 to 1. By late 2004, it had risen nationally to 4 to 1. All these people were saying it was nearly as high in some other countries, says Zillman. But the problem wasn't just that it was 4 to 1. In Los Angeles, it was 10 to 1, and in Miami, 8.5 to 1. And then you couple that with the buyers. They weren't real buyers, they were speculators. The number of for sale signs began rising in mid-2005 and never stopped. In the summer 2006, the Case-Shiller index of house prices peaked and house prices across the country began to fall. For the entire year, they would fall nationally by 2%. Either piece of new rising rating standards or falling house prices should have disrupted the subprime mortgage market and caused the price of insuring the bond to rise. Instead, the price of insuring the bond fell. Insurance on the crappiest BBB tranche of a subprime mortgage bond now costs less than 2% a year. We finally just did a trade with Lipman, said Eastman. Then we tried to figure out what we had done. The minute they had done their first trade, they joined Greg Lipman's long and growing email list. Right up until the collapse, Lipman would pepper them with agitprop about the housing market and his own idea of which prime mortgage bond his customers should bet against. Anytime Lipman would offer us paper, Whitney and I look at each other and say, no, said Danny Moose. That take Lipman's advice, but only up to a point. They still hadn't gotten around to trust anyone inside a Wall Street bond department anyway. It was their job, not Lipman's, to evaluate the individual bond. Mike Burry focused abstractly on the structure of the loan, and but on pools with high concentration of the type that he believed were designed to fail. Eastman and his partners focused concretely on the people doing the borrowing and the lending. The subprime market tapped a segment of the American public that did not typically have anything to do with Wall Street. The tranche between the 5th and the 29th percentile in their credit rating. That is, the lenders were making loans to people who were less creditworthy than 71% of the population. Which of these poor Americans were likely to jump which way with their finances? How much did their home prices need to fall for the loans to blow up? Which mortgage originators were the most corrupt? Which Wall Street firm were creating the most dishonest mortgage bond? What kind of people in which part of the country exhibit the highest degree of financial irresponsibility? The default rate in Georgia was 5 times higher than in Florida, even though the two states had the same unemployment rate. Why? Indiana had a 25% default rate, California only 5%, even though Californians were, on the face of it, far less fiscally responsible. Why? Bonnie and Denny flew down to Miami where they wander around empty neighborhoods built with subprime loans and saw with their own eyes how bad things were. They call me and say, "Oh my god, this is a calamity here," recall Eastman. In short, they perform the sort of nitty-gritty credit analysis on the mortgage loan that should have been done before the loan were made in the first place. Then they run hunting for crooks and fools. Excuse me. The first time I realized how bad things it was, said Eastman, was when I said to Lipman, "Send me the list of 2006 deals with high no-doc loans." Eastman, predisposed to suspect fraud in the market, wanted to bet against American who had been lent money without having been required to show evidence of income or employment. I figured Lipman was going to send me deals that had 20% no docs. He sent us a list and none of them had less than 50%. They called Wall Street trading desk and asked for a menu of subprime mortgage bonds so they might find the most rotten one and buy the smartest insurance. The juiciest short. The bonds, ultimately backed by the mortgage, most likely to default, had several characteristics. First, the underlying loans were heavily concentrated in what Wall Street people were now calling the Sand States: California, Florida, Nevada, and Arizona. How prices in the Sand States had risen fastest during the boom, and so would likely crash fastest in a bust. And when they did, those low California default rate would soar. Second, the loan would have been made by the more dubious mortgage lenders. Long Beach Saving, wholly owned by Washington Mutual, was a prime example of financial incontinence. Long Beach Saving had been the first to embrace the originate and sell model and now was moving money out the door to new home buyers as fast as it could. Few questions asked. Third, the pool would have a higher than average number of low doc or no doc loans. That is, loans more likely to be fraudulent. Long Beach Savings, it appeared to Eastman and his partners, specialized in asking homeowners with bad credit and no proof of income to accept floating rate mortgages. No money down, interest payment deferred upon request. The housing blocks of Southern California teemed with stories of financial abuse made possible by these so-called 30-year payment option ARMs or adjustable rate mortgages. In Bakersfield, California, a Mexican strawberry picker with an income of $14,000 and no English was lent every penny he needed to buy a house for $724,000. The more they examined the individual bonds, the more they came to see patterns in the loan that could be exploited for profit. The new taste for lending huge sum of money to poor immigrants, for instance. One day, Eastman's housekeeper, a Southern American woman, came to him and told him that she was planning to buy a townhouse in Queens. The price was absurd, and they were giving her a no money down option adjustable rate mortgage, says Eastman, who talked her into taking out a conventional fixed rate mortgage. Next, the baby nurse he had hired back in 2003 to take care of his new twin daughters phoned him. She was this lovely woman from Jamaica. He said, "She says she and her sister own 6 townhouses in Queens." I said, "Corinne, how did that happen?" "It happened because after they bought the first one and its value rose, the lender came and suggested they refinance and take out 250K, which they used to buy another. Then the price of that one rose too, and they repeat the experiment. By the time they were done, they owned 5 of them. The market was falling, and they couldn't make any of the payment. The sudden ability of his baby nurse to obtain loan was no accident. Like pretty much everything else that was happening between subprime mortgage borrowers and lenders, it followed from the defect of the models used to evaluate subprime mortgage bond by the 2 major rating agencies, Moody's and Standard & Poor's. The big Wall Street firms, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, and others, had the same goal as any manufacturing business: to pay as little as possible for raw material, home loans, and charge as much as possible for their end product, mortgage bond. The price of the end product was driven by the rating agencies. The ratings assigned to it by the model used by Moody's and S&P. The inner working of these models were officially a secret. Moody's and S&P claimed they were impossible to game, but everyone on Wall Street knew that the people who ran the model were ripped for exploitation. Guys who can't get a job on Wall Street get a job at Moody's, as one Goldman Sachs trader turned hedge fund manager put it. Inside the rating agency, there was another hierarchy, even less flattering to the prime mortgage bond raters. At the rating agencies, the corporate credit people are the least bad. Say quant who engineer mortgage bond for Morgan Stanley. Next are the prime mortgage people. Then you have the asset-backed people, who are basically like brain dead. Wall Street bond trading desk, staffed by people making 7 figures a year, set out to coax from the brain dead guys making 5 figures, the highest possible rating for the worst possible loan. They perform the task with Ivy League thoroughness and efficiency. They quickly figure out, for instance, that the people at Moody's and S&P didn't actually evaluate the individual home loans or so much as look at them. All they and their model saw and evaluated were the general characteristics of loan pools. The handling of FICO scores were one example. FICO score, so called because they were invented in the 1950s by a company called the Fair Isaac Corporation, purported to measure the creditworthiness of individual borrowers. The highest possible FICO score was 850, the lowest was 300. The US median was 723. FICO scores were simplistic. They didn't account for a borrower's income, for instance. They could also be rigged. A would-be borrower could raise his FICO score by taking out a credit card loan and immediately paying it back. But never mind, the problem with FICO score was overshadowed by the way they were misused by rating agencies. Moody's and S&P asked the loan packagers not for a list of the FICO score of all the borrowers, but for the average FICO score of the pool. To meet the rating agency standard, to maximize the percentage of AAA rated bond created from any given pool of loan, the average FICO score of the borrowers in the pool needed to be around 615. There was more than one way to arrive at the average number, and therein lay a huge opportunity. A pool of loan composed of borrowers, all of whom had a FICO score of 615, was far less likely to suffer huge losses than a pool of loan composed of borrowers, half of whom had FICO score of 550, and half of whom had score of 680. A person with a FICO score of 550 was virtually certain to fall and should never have been lent money in the first place. But the hole in the rating agency's model enabled the loan to be made. As long as a borrower with a FICO score of 680 could be found to offset the deadbeat and keep the average at 615. Where to find the borrowers with high FICO score? Here, the Wall Street bond trading desk explored another blind spot in the rating agency's model. Apparently, the agency didn't grasp the difference between a thin file FICO score and a thick file FICO score. A thin file FICO score implied, as it sounds, a short credit history. The file was thin because the borrower hadn't done much borrowing. Immigrants who had never failed to repay a debt because they had never been given a loan often had surprisingly high thin file FICO score. Thus, a Jamaican baby nurse or Mexican strawberry picker with an income of 14K looking to borrow $750,000 who filtered through the models at Moody and S&P became suddenly more useful from a credit rating ranking point of view. They might actually improve the perceived quality of the pool of loans and increase the percentage that could be declared AAA. The Mexican harvest strawberry, Wall Street harvested his FICO score. The models used by the rating agencies were riddled with these sort of opportunities. The trick was finding them before others did. Finding, for example, that both Moody's and S&P favor floating rate mortgages with low teaser rate over fixed rate one, or that they didn't care if a loan had been made in a booming real estate market or a quiet one, or that they were seemingly obvious to the fraud implicit in no-doc loan, or that they were blind to the presence of silent second mortgage that left the homeowner with no equity in his home and thus no financial incentive not to hand the key to the bank and walk away from it every time some smart Wall Street mortgage bond packager discover another example of the rating agency's idiocy or neglect. He had himself an edge in the marketplace. Crappier pools of loans were cheaper to buy than less crappy pools. Bubble-shaped loan pool with lots of very low and very high FICO score in them were bargain compared to pool clustered around 615 average, at least until the rest of the Wall Street caught on to the hole in the brain of the rating agencies and bid up the price. Before that happened, the Wall Street firm enjoyed a perverse monopoly. They phone up an originator and say, "Don't tell anybody, but if you bring me a pool of loan teaming with high thin file FICO score, I'll pay you more for it than anyone else." The more egregious the rating agency's mistake, the bigger the opportunity for the Wall Street trading desk. In the late summer 2006, Eastman and his partner knew none of this. All they knew was that Wall Street investment banks apparently employ people to do nothing but game their rating agency models. In a rational market, the bond backed by pools of weaker loans would have been priced lower than the bond backed by stronger loans. So prime mortgage bonds all were priced by the rating bestowed on them by Moody's. The AAA tranches all traded at one price and BBB tranches all traded at another, even though there were important differences from one BBB tranches to another. As the bonds were all priced off the Moody's rating, the most overpriced bond were the bond that had been most inaptly rated, and the bond that had been most inaptly rated were the bond that Wall Street firm had tricked the rating agency into rating most inaptly. "I cannot fucking believe this is allowed," said Eastman. "I must have said that 1,000 times." Eastman didn't know exactly how the rating agencies had been gamed. He had to learn. Thus began his team's months-long quest to find the most overrated bond in the market composed of overrated bonds. A month or so into it, after they bought their first credit default swap on subprime mortgage bond from Lipman, Winston, Daniel, and Danny Moose flew to Orlando for what amount to a subprime mortgage bond conference. It had an opaque title, AABS East, but it was in effect a trade show for narrow industry. The guy who originated subprime mortgage, the Wall Street firm that packaged and sold subprime mortgages, fund managers who invested in nothing but subprime mortgages, backed bonds, the agencies that rated subprime mortgage bonds, the lawyer who did whatever the lawyers did. Daniels and Moose thought they were paying a courtesy call on a cottage industry, but the cottage was a castle. There were so many people being fed by this industry, said Daniel. That's when we realized that the fixed income department of the brokerage firm were built on this. That's it for this part. I'll see you next episode, man.